The truth has surfaced, but not all truths demand applause. Some truths arrive quietly, settling into place like dust after a storm. They don't announce themselves, don't require witnesses or validation. They simply exist, undeniable and complete, changing everything while appearing to change nothing at all. The streets returned to quiet. December had brought cold that seeped into bones, into concrete, into the spaces between buildings where wind gathered and amplified. The kind of cold that makes people move faster, speak less, retreat into whatever warmth they can find or create. But the quiet was different now. Not the oppressive silence of places where dreams go to die, but the peaceful silence of places where unnecessary noise has been stripped away, leaving only what matters. Lin left that night. Not dramatically. No final confrontation. No scene where truths were shouted and accusations hurled. Nothing that would give him the satisfaction of being important enough to warrant drama. The exact mechanism was unclear, or rather, it was deliberately unclear, handled through administrative channels that allowed everyone to maintain face while acknowledging reality. A reassignment, perhaps. A lateral move that was actually a demotion disguised as opportunity. A quiet suggestion that his talents might be better utilized elsewhere, anywhere elsewhere. Not fired publicly. Not dragged through shame. The system had mercy, even for those who'd shown little mercy themselves. Just removed. Like a tumor excised carefully, leaving healthy tissue intact. Like a splinter finally worked free from skin. Gone in a way that created relief rather than absence. The people who once listened to him no longer did. That was the real punishment, more severe than any official sanction. To speak and realize nobody's listening. To enter rooms and feel attention slide past you like water off stone. To discover that your presence has become optional, your opinions irrelevant, your entire existence reduced to background noise in other people's more important stories. Lin had spent his life believing that authority was something you were given. By position, by title, by institutional backing. He never understood that real authority is something you earn, slowly and often invisibly, through competence and consistency and the kind of trustworthiness that can't be performed or faked. By the time he understood the difference, it was too late. The day after Lin's departure, Duri arrived at the warehouse to find the manager waiting for him. "We need to talk," the manager said, his tone neutral, unreadable. Duri nodded, following him to the small office that served as administrative headquarters for the distribution center. "Close the door," the manager said. Duri did, then stood quietly waiting. He'd learned long ago that silence gives you information. People fill silence, reveal things they didn't plan to reveal, show you what matters to them through what makes them uncomfortable. The manager studied him for a long moment. "You know what's happening, don't you?" "Things are changing," Duri said carefully. "That's an understatement." The manager leaned back in his chair. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of people come through here. Most are competent. Some are exceptional. A very few actually understand systems, not just how to operate within them, but how they work, why they work, where they break down." He paused, giving Duri space to respond. Duri said nothing. "You're one of those few," the manager continued. "And I'm not the only one who's noticed. Regional has been asking questions. About efficiency improvements. About how we're consistently outperforming other centers. About you." "I just do my job," Duri said. "No. You do everyone's job. Better than they do it themselves." The manager smiled slightly. "That's a compliment, by the way. Also a problem." "How so?" "Because you're still officially just a delivery driver. And that creates complications. Questions about why someone with your skills is in that position. Whether we're failing to develop talent. Whether there's something I'm not seeing. Duri remained quiet, processing implications. So here's the situation, the manager said. I can offer you a promotion. Logistics coordinator. Better pay, better hours, official authority to match what you're already doing informally. It's a good offer. You'd be excellent at it. But Duri heard the unspoken word. But nothing. It's a genuine offer. I'm just curious why you haven't pursued this yourself. Why you've been content to remain invisible. The question hung between them, heavy with significance. Duri took his time answering, choosing words carefully. I wasn't ready before. And the position doesn't matter as much as the work. Is that true? Or is that something you tell yourself? Both, probably. The manager nodded slowly. Take a few days. Think about it. The offer stands. Louri walked beside Duri that evening as they made their usual route through the neighborhood. Not to celebrate. Not to ask questions about what had happened with Lin, about what might happen next, about opportunities or changes or any of the forward-looking inquiries people usually make when they sense transformation approaching. Just to exist in the calm. They walked in comfortable silence, their footsteps synchronized without effort, moving through streets they'd walked countless times before, past landmarks of their shared history. The store where they'd once stolen food. The school where they'd learned limitation before they learned anything else. The corner where Lin used to hold court, now empty except for a few teenagers who didn't know the stories, didn't care about the hierarchies that had seemed so permanent just months ago. Everything looked the same. And everything was different. Are you going to take it? Louri finally asked. The promotion? Duri glanced at her. How did you know? I didn't. But it's obvious something would change. You can't do what you've been doing without someone eventually making it official. Does it matter? Whether I take it? She considered this. Not to me. But maybe to you. Why would it matter to me? Because you spent years proving something. Maybe you're not done proving it yet. Duri stopped walking, turned to face her fully. I'm done proving things, he said quietly. I proved what I needed to prove, to myself, not to anyone else. That I could leave without disappearing. That I could come back without being defeated. That I could build something real from nothing visible. So what now? Now I just live. Whatever that means. Work continued in the days that followed. Deliveries. Meetings. Decisions made without noise or performance. The warehouse operated more smoothly than it had in years. Not because of any single dramatic change, but because of accumulated small improvements, because of systems that had been quietly optimized, because of trust that allowed people to focus on work rather than politics. Duri accepted the promotion, though he insisted on conditions, that delivery drivers be paid more, that training be improved, that efficiency gains be shared with workers rather than extracted as pure profit. His requests were reasonable, backed by data, presented without ultimatum. They were accepted. Not because he had leverage, exactly, but because refusing would have revealed that the organization cared more about hierarchy than results, more about control than competence. And nobody wanted to make that admission explicit. Duri never revealed everything to Louri. Not because he couldn't, but because love doesn't require receipts. She didn't need to know every detail of how things had shifted, every conversation and calculation and careful observation that had led to Lin's departure and Duri's quiet ascension. She didn't need proof of competence or documentation of success. She'd seen enough. Had always seen enough. Some people need constant validation, constant evidence that their faith is justified. But Louri had learned a different kind of trust, the kind that doesn't demand explanation, doesn't require performance, simply believes because believing is a choice you make about who someone is, not what they can prove. One evening in late December, as the year moved toward its close, They sat on their usual steps despite the cold. The street was empty. The lights flickered as they always had. The cracks spread as they always would. Louri finally spoke, her voice soft but carrying clearly in the winter air. "You didn't test me," she said. "You tested yourself." Duri stopped adjusting his jacket against the cold. Turned to look at her. She continued, meeting his eyes steadily. "You were afraid time changed me. That I'd become bitter or moved on or stopped believing. But you were really afraid it changed you. That you'd become someone who couldn't come back. Someone who'd let distance transform into disappearance. Someone who broke promises." Duri felt something tighten in his chest. The accuracy of her observation, the way she'd seen through defenses he hadn't known he was maintaining. He nodded slowly. "You're right. I know I'm right." Her tone was gentle, not triumphant. "And now you know too. You didn't leave to prove something to Lynn or the street or even to me. You left to prove something to yourself. That you were capable of more. That poverty doesn't define capacity. That the story everyone tells about people like us isn't the only story possible." "And did I prove it?" She smiled slightly. "Came back. That's proof enough. But I came back to basically nothing. Same street. Same struggles. Just with a slightly better job title." "You came back to yourself," Louri corrected. "To the person you promised to be. That's not nothing. That's everything." They sat in silence, processing years of unspoken understanding finally articulated. "No more tests," she said finally, taking his hand. Not romantically, though romance was there somewhere beneath the surface. But as equals. As people who'd survived different trials and arrived at the same conclusion about what matters. He squeezed her hand gently. "No more tests," he agreed. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Whatever comes next. Together, if you want." "I want. Even though I'm still basically the same person who left? Even though I don't have wealth or status or anything impressive to offer." She laughed softly. "Especially because of that. You think I want someone who needs to be impressive? I want someone who knows the difference between impressive and real. Someone who understands that the best success is the kind nobody sees. Someone who kept a promise when breaking it would have been easier." That's a low bar. It's the highest bar there is. Most people never clear it. The street remembered nothing loudly. Streets don't remember the way people do, with stories and significance and emotional weight. Streets simply exist, hosting countless small dramas that seem monumental to participants but barely register in the larger flow of time. Lynn's departure would eventually be forgotten, become one of dozens of minor personnel changes that happen in any community. Duri's return would fade into background, become unremarkable, just another person who left and came back with little to show for it by conventional measures. The neighborhood would continue its slow cycles of struggle and survival, of small hopes and smaller victories, of lives lived quietly without witness or recognition. But they remembered. Duri remembered what it felt like to leave, to survive, to rebuild yourself from nothing in places that didn't care who you'd been or who you might become. Remembered the promise that kept him tethered when cutting loose would have been easier. Remembered learning the difference between success that looks impressive and success that feels real. Louri remembered what it felt like to wait without waiting, to believe without evidence, to trust that absence wasn't abandonment. Remembered building her own life while holding space for someone who might never return. Remembered choosing faith over bitterness when bitterness would have been justified. Together, they remembered what the street would forget, that the smallest decisions often matter most, that keeping promises is harder than making them, that coming back takes more courage than leaving, that the best transformations happen where no one's watching. On the last workday before the break, the warehouse manager called Duri into his office one final time. "I wanted to thank you," the manager said. For what you built here. For how you changed things without ever making it about yourself. I just did what made sense, Duri replied. That's exactly it, the manager said with a quiet smile. You made it look simple. Like anyone could have done it. But they didn't. You did. Duri nodded. No false humility. No pride. Just acceptance. And what you did with Lin, the manager continued, choosing his words carefully. You could have crushed him publicly. Turned it into a spectacle. Made it personal. What would that have solved? Duri asked. Nothing, the manager said. And you knew that. Instead, you became indispensable. And that was something he could never compete with. I didn't do it to hurt him. I know, the manager said. And that's why it worked. They shook hands. When Duri stepped outside, the December cold greeted him like an old truth. Honest. What he felt wasn't victory. It wasn't happiness. It was peace. The kind that comes when you've kept your word to yourself. When you've built something real without needing anyone to applaud. That evening, he walked with Louri through the neighborhood one last time before the year ended. The street hadn't changed. The lights still flickered. The cracks still ran along the walls. Lin was gone now. But places like this always replaced men like him. What had changed was quieter. They stopped walking. Duri didn't rehearse it. Didn't dramatize it. I need to tell you something, he said. She waited. I'm not just doing okay, he said slowly. I never was when I came back. I had already built something elsewhere. I came back like this on purpose. She looked at him. Not shocked. Not angry. Just still. I'm wealthy, he said. More than enough. There was the truth he had carried silently. She took a breath. Then she smiled. Not the kind that celebrates money. The kind that releases something held for a long time. So, she said softly, you weren't running. You were testing the world. And myself, he said. She nodded. I thought so. You're not upset? She shook her head. No. I'm relieved. Relieved? That it was real, she said. That I didn't wait for nothing. That the man I believed in was exactly who I thought he was. She stepped closer. I didn't love you because you struggled, she said. I loved you because you stayed honest inside yourself. Money doesn't change that. They continued walking. Quieter now. At her apartment door, she paused and turned to him. Come in, she said. Sit. Not forever. Not as a promise. Just for now. He smiled. No more tests. No more tests, she said. Just us. And that was enough. The street would forget them. The warehouse would reopen. Life would continue its ordinary rhythm. But two people who had learned patience the hard way were no longer walking alone. They were building something small. Something small and real. And this time, nothing was hidden. If this story touched something in you, especially about Duri's quiet persistence, Louri's patient faith and hope, and made you realize the understanding that the best victories are often invisible than its purpose is served. Thank you for listening. Please like the video, subscribe for more slow burn stories, and share it with someone who believes loyalty is still real.